Amidst the ancient stone walls of Windsor, where time seems to stand still in the sound of chapel bells, there is a man being imprisoned. He is held not by bars or chains, but by an invisible prison named self-complacency. 40 years ago, all of Britain bowed before a god emerging from the sea. Prince Andrew at that time was not just a prince, he was the embodiment of courage. A helicopter pilot returning proudly from the fierce gunfire of the Falklands War. In those days, his smile was as radiant as the dawn over the Atlantic Ocean, promising a glorious future for the dynasty. But look at the darkness of reality. Now, that smile has been replaced by a vacant expression following interrogations and the coldness of his own family. A national hero has personally torn apart the cloak of glory to exchange it for tickets into the underworld of sinful billionaires. If power is an opiate, then Andrew is the one who has overdosed. There is a grim contrast that borders on the ridiculous, while taxpayers out there are struggling with every single penny. Inside the 30-bedroom mansion, that prince is spending hours checking whether the teddy bears on his bed are placed at the correct angle or not. Luxury has turned into vanity. Power has turned into autocracy. And public trust, the most precious asset of a royal family, has been incinerated in private jet trips worth millions of pounds. Welcome to Insider and Secrets. Today, we will not just talk about money or scandals. We will decode the fall of a hero to see that when a prince forgets the meaning of service, the most brilliant crown becomes nothing more than a heavy shackle. Part 1. The Falklands Glory, when the crown casts a shadow amidst gunfire. In the annals of dynasties, there are moments when destiny seems to have been written in gold ink. But there are also moments when destiny is tested by fire and blood. For Prince Andrew, the first chapter of his life did not begin in lavish banquets, but started amidst the cold seas of the Atlantic Ocean in 1982. A symphony of iron and fire. Imagine a gray afternoon in the Falkland Islands. The roar of jet engines tears through the sky, and giant columns of water stand upright after each explosion from Exocet missiles. Amidst that chaotic scene, a Sea King helicopter is hovering like an iron dragonfly, performing the mission of decoys to distract enemy missiles to protect the fleet. The person holding the controls of that helicopter was not an anonymous soldier, but the second son of the Queen of England. At that moment, Andrew was not just a prince, he was the humanization of a nation's courage. When a person carrying royal blood chooses to face death instead of hiding behind the thick walls of Buckingham Palace, the British people saw in him a modern, guardian god. It was a strange spiritual connection between subjects and the dynasty, a string tightened by sacrifice. When a 22-year-old young man stepped down from the aircraft carrier HMS Invincible with a rose in his mouth and a radiant smile, the whole world cheered for him as an immortal hero. But was that glory a gift, or in reality, a sweet trap of destiny? The dialectics of invincibility. History always operates according to ironical dialectics. A brilliant victory often comes with the price of self-complacency. When you face missiles and survive, the world around suddenly becomes small. Those rules, limits, and even ordinary moral standards seem to be only for mere mortals. For a prince who had just returned from the gunfire, did he begin to feel that he belonged to a different level, a place where the laws of physics and society could not reach? It is said that Andrew was the Queen's favorite child. In the eyes of a mother who had witnessed her son enter the gates of death and return proudly, perhaps every subsequent request of his became trivial. When the mother's love blended with the nation's worship, an illusion of privilege began to take root. If the glory of the war was the light, then self-complacency was its shadow. The more brilliant the light, the longer the shadow, and in the years that followed, that shadow seemed to have begun to obscure the very meaning of the service he had once performed. The transformation of values. Observe the way a military hero gradually transforms into a symbol of luxury. When the gunfire ceased, Andrew returned to the life of a peacetime prince. But there was a problem. How to maintain the wonderful feeling like when controlling a combat helicopter, when there were no more actual enemies to face. It seemed he had found a new battlefield, the world of unlimited privileges. Discourse on power shows that when a person believes they deserve to enjoy everything because of what they have done, They begin to regard luxury as an essential need rather than a reward. The Sea King helicopter of yesteryear has now been replaced by civilian flights costing thousands of pounds, even for distances that an ordinary car could reach. The comparison here is profound. If in 1982 he flew to save people, then in the decades that followed, people saw him fly just to assert his status. Is the act of flying high in the sky the only way for him to maintain the distance between himself and the world of reality, a world that he perhaps never wanted to truly belong to? It is often said that the beginning of a collapse always lies at the peak of glory. Andrew entered adulthood with all the best cards in his hand: appearance, reputation, mother's love, and the admiration of the public. But those very cards created an excessive confidence. He was like a pilot believing he could fly forever without ever needing to refuel, or needing to look down at the ground for navigation. The trap of privilege was set invisibly. It did not force him to do anything evil immediately. It simply lulled his sense of responsibility. When you believe you are a god from after the Falklands War, you will begin to look at relationships, assets, and privileges with a very different eye. But the glory of the past cannot nourish the material desires that are increasingly expanding. When the hero left the helicopter cockpit to enter the closed boardrooms of the ultra-wealthy, a new game began, a game where royal titles became the most expensive currency. We will decode the mysterious deals and traceless flights together. Part 2. Contract signed in the shadows, when the crown leaves the ground. Imagine you are standing on the stage of the most ultimate powers on the planet. The roar of the engine of the 40 million pound Bombardier Global Express private jet is thundering, drowning out all the background noise of real life. Inside the cabin, the smell of high-end leather blends with the flavor of $1,000 red wine glasses. That is where Prince Andrew begins a new game, the game of a shadow broker. 1. The Golden Key and the Closed Doors. In 2001, when the aura of the naval hero began to fade over time, Prince Andrew put on a tailored suit from Savile Row to take on the role of special representative for trade. But instead of a diligent civil servant, people saw in him the image of a king without a throne in the global business world. The title Duke of York at this time was no longer a historical title. It had turned into a golden key capable of opening wide the doors that even money sometimes had to concede to. There is a strange humanization here. That title seemed to have its own soul. It stayed one step ahead of him, rolling out the red carpet and silencing all doubts. We should ask ourselves, in closed meeting rooms in Kazakhstan or yacht parties in Saint-Tropez, did people seek after Andrew because of his negotiation talent, or because they yearned to touch the shadow of a 1,000-year-old dynasty? When royal power is refracted through the prism of billion-dollar deals, it is no longer a brilliant light, but becomes a blurry kind of light, where the boundary between public and private is blurred. 2. Mystery at South York, when rubble turns into diamonds. Let us go back in time to a gray afternoon at Sunning Hill Park. The 12-bedroom mansion, the Queen's wedding gift, was at that time only a pile of desolate ruins. A leaking roof, moldy walls, and the mocking name, South York, from the press seemed to have sealed its fate. For 5 years, no one was interested in the price of £12 million. But then, an economic miracle happened. A billionaire from Central Asia appeared like a saving god. He did not haggle. He did not hesitate. He threw out £15 million to £3 million higher than the listed price, to buy a pile of rubble. The dialectics here are truly astonishing. Why would a seasoned investor accept a loss-making transaction right from the start? Could it be that the £3 million difference was not paid for the land area, but was paid for an invisible asset lying inside the seller's bloodstream? £3 million. That is a figure that an average British person has to work for hundreds of years to obtain. But here, it was just a slight nod between noble men. 3. Air miles Andy. A view from an altitude of 30.000 feet. If you want to understand the disconnect between Andrew and the real world, you must look up at the sky. The nickname, Air Miles Andy, is not just a sarcasm, it is a metaphor for separation. While the train stations in London were crowded with employees with tired faces, our prince chose to glide on the clouds. A 50-mile trip just for lunch? A helicopter would be waiting with a cost of £3.000. A transcontinental business trip? It had to be a private plane with a bedroom, a chef, and lavatories more luxurious than a five-star hotel. Let us use this comparison to see the cruelty. The roar of helicopter blades in the sky of Berkshire is the sound of absolute privilege. At that altitude, the worries about electricity bills, taxes, or food prices of the people below seemed to disappear completely. Andrew did not travel, he toured between oases of luxury, where reality never reached the hem of his shirt. 4. The touches in Epstein's labyrinth. And then, we reach the darkest area of the labyrinth, the townhouses in New York and the isolated island of Jeffrey Epstein. Here, we will not talk about crimes, let us talk about the psychology of superiority. Why would a person bearing the name of a prince find resonance with a person cast out by society? Perhaps because in Epstein's world, power was absolute and service was endless. It was a parallel kingdom, where there was no prying press, no questioning parliament, and especially no word, no. The discourse here is very profound. When you are born into silk and grow up in worship, you will easily fall into the illusion that you belong to another world order, an order where morality is only an option, and laws are only suggestions. Andrew did not choose a friend, he chose a lifestyle where his ego was nourished in the most blind way. The price of self-complacency never appears on the invoice immediately. It silently erodes honor, like the way seawater erodes the base of a sandcastle. However, all those private jets or those million-dollar deals were still not the strangest thing. To truly understand the child inside this 60-year-old man, we must step into the closed bedroom at Royal Lodge. Why would a naval general need 72 teddy bears dressed in sailor outfits to guard his sleep? Where does the secret lie between those stuffed dolls and the collapse of a personal empire? We will decode it in the final part. The army of teddy bears and the final illusion of the forgotten prince. Do not leave, because this is the time when Insider&Secrets strips away the deepest truth. Part 3. The army of stuffed bears and the final illusion, when time stands still. If Part 1 was an epic of fire and blood, and Part 2 was a labyrinth of power calculations, then Part 3 is a slow-motion film, quiet to the point of shivering, about loneliness and the disconnect from reality. Welcome to Royal Lodge, where there is a strange oasis, where time seems to have stopped 4 decades ago. Ritual in the closed room. Imagine a silent morning in Windsor. In the large bedroom of a man in his 60s, the space is not filled with political documents or symbols of power. Instead, one sees a strange army, 72 teddy bears. This is not a fabricated detail, according to those who once served here. Every morning, the housekeeping staff must perform a ritual that is meticulous to the point of extreme. The 72 teddy bears, mostly dressed in sailor outfits, must be arranged precisely according to a preset diagram on the bed. Some bears are placed solemnly on small mahogany thrones. If a staff member accidentally displaces a position by even 1 centimeter, they will have to face a fury that is not small. The humanization here does not lie in the bears, but in the very desire for control of their owner. When the outside world begins to turn its back, when the headlines in the press become wordless sentences, Andrew seems to have found absolute comfort in a world where he is the only king. There, the 72 teddy bears are always silent, always obedient, and always in the exact position he desires. They are the most loyal subjects, those who never ask questions or judge his past. The dialectics of nostalgia, Peter Pan syndrome. Why teddy bears? And why sailor outfits? If we use dialectics to look back at his life, we will see a heartbreaking truth. Those bears are the incarnation of the golden age in the Falklands in 1982, the time when he was his most beautiful, most courageous, and most loved. The sailor outfits on the teddy bears are like a desperate effort to hold on to the soul of the hero of yesteryear, whom reality has gradually lost amidst luxury suits and shady deals. Psychologists often talk about Peter Pan syndrome, children who refuse to grow up. In the world of royal privilege, the boundary between being cared for and being made weak is very fragile. When you are born into a system where every smallest need is met, from tying shoelaces to arranging teddy bears, do you still have the ability to face the real storms of life? Andrew does not just live in a mansion, he lives in a psychological golden cocoon. The disconnect from reality is not only shown in his not knowing the price of a liter of milk, but in his believing that the world still owes him the worship of 1982. Regardless of what has happened. The grim contrast. Mahogany thrones and taxpayer money. Put the image of the teddy bears on mahogany thrones next to the image of British people who are tightening their belts. This comparison carries a sharp discourse on social fairness. Why must taxpayers pay millions of pounds each year for security costs at a place where the most important task of the day for a team of staff is to arrange toys for a grown man? The Royal Lodge Mansion, with its 30 bedrooms and a symbolic rent of only £1, has become a symbol of an unbridgeable inequality. There, Andrew is not just spending money, he is spending the very last patience of the public. Luxury at this time no longer evokes admiration, but only strangeness. When hedonism far exceeds service, the shadow of the crown will become darker and heavier than ever. The end of an illusion, when the lights go out in 2022. A historical turning point occurred. Queen Elizabeth II, his last shield, passed away. King Charles III, the older brother with a mindset of streamlining the royal family, has begun to tighten the strings of privilege. Military titles were stripped, and the title, His Royal Highness, was revoked. Prince Andrew is now like a general without an army, a pilot without a plane. He still stays in Royal Lodge, but it is no longer a palace, it is more like a golden prison. The fall of Andrew is a profound lesson on power. Privilege without morality is a high-risk loan. He borrowed the aura of the dynasty to nourish his personal ego. And when the repayment deadline arrived, the price to pay was none other than being forgotten by history. The story of Prince Andrew is not just about a wealthy man. It is a story of the fierce collision between old traditions and harsh reality. Those 72 teddy bears will likely still lie there, on those small mahogany thrones, waiting for a morning when their owner is once again cheered by the whole world as a hero. But outside the window of Royal Lodge, the world has changed, the British people have moved on, and the dynasty is also seeking to renew itself by cutting off dry branches. We do not judge Andrew, because life has given him his own sentence, the sentence of a man stuck in his own past. The luxury he worshipped eventually only consists of stuffed animals and a room void of real laughter. Dear friend, after all the luxury, the private jets, and the teddy bears, perhaps the biggest lesson Prince Andrew leaves for us is, true wealth does not lie in what we own, but in empathy and responsibility towards the world around us. When a prince forgets how to walk on the ground, he will forever be lost in the clouds of self-complacency. Thank you for accompanying Insider and Secrets in this journey to decode this contradictory life. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next secrets of power. Now, what do you think about Andrew's army of stuffed animals? Please leave your comments below.